Have a specific procedure written down that defines how and when you need to write a progress note within 24 hours of session or prior to submitting the insurance claim. Even if you were a solo practitioner, having a policy and procedures manual can be hugely helpful for things like this. It helps you stay organized and make sure that you have a plan in place.
Welcome to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. Hi, I'm Jeanene Wolfe, and I'm your colleague down the hall. I have a passion for helping fellow therapists get the clinical and collegial support we all need to do this work. And wow, it just keeps getting harder every day. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Collab Oasis Clinical Consultation Groups. I have been a social worker for almost 30 years, and I own a successful solo online private practice. More of us than ever are practicing in solo or online practices, and we all need colleagues to process cases with, commiserate with on those really hard days, and also to celebrate our successes with. In this podcast, I'll bring you insights about trends and changes in our field and sit down with amazing therapists who are doing amazing work. We'll discuss fictionalized cases, ways to practice sustainably, and of course, there will be plenty of laughing. I love laughing with friends. I'm so glad to have you as one of my colleagues down the hall.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. I'm your host, Jeanene Wolfe, and today I'll be diving into a topic that many therapists can relate to, getting behind on progress notes. In fact, if you ask around about the aspects of clinical work that cause problems for therapists, you will probably find writing progress notes in the top 3 at least. Today, I'll explore the impact this can have on therapists, the potential risks involved professionally, and of course, provide you with practical solutions to overcome this challenge. Let's start by understanding the impact of falling behind on progress notes. When we find ourselves as therapists overwhelmed with the administrative tasks, such as documentation, filing for insurance, all of those things, it can significantly impact our well-being and the quality of care we provide. Here are some of the key areas where the impact is felt. Number 1, the therapist emotional well-being. Getting behind on notes can lead to increased stress, anxiety, and feelings of being overwhelmed. It adds to the already demanding nature of the therapeutic work, potentially leading to burnout. The emotional toll of constantly playing catch-up can affect a therapist's job satisfaction and sense of professional fulfillment. It may erode their passion for helping others and hinder their ability to provide optimal care. There's also professional risks. Delayed or incomplete notes may put therapists at risk from a professional standpoint. It can lead to ethical concerns, potential legal issues, or challenges during audits or insurance billing processes. Inaccurate or missing documentation can compromise the continuity of care, hinder collaboration with other healthcare providers, and that can impact the client's treatment. Then there's also client care and outcomes to be concerned about. The impact of falling behind on progress notes extends to client care. Incomplete or delayed documentation may affect treatment planning, intervention effectiveness, and continuity of care. And poor documentation can lead to a lack of clarity in the client's progress, making it difficult to track treatment goals, evaluate outcomes, or identify necessary adjustments in the therapeutic approach. And in case you think you're the only one who has ever gotten behind on progress notes, please know that staying current can be hard for clinicians for a variety of reasons. And this isn't something we discuss very openly in our profession. So if you find that you're behind on progress notes, reach out to a colleague or two, because I guarantee you they've gotten behind at one point or another. So let's look at 6 areas that can cause difficulty for therapists in staying current. Number 1 is the emotional toll of the session causes you to avoid writing the note. And when you do write it, you experience the session again, which can exacerbate vicarious trauma to the therapist. Number 2, you don't have a good system in place to make sure that you're on top of your notes. Area number 3, you're ADHD like me and find it hard to get motivated to do mundane tasks. Area number 4, you are so far behind that overload and fear of an audit have you paralyzed. Number 5, you feel insecure about what should be in the note and worry that you are not covering all the bases. And let me tell you, I've been running my clinical consultation groups for years now, and it's a topic that comes up on a regular basis. we are not trained very well in our field about documentation. Most of us learn it during our practicum or internships. And if they do a good job of teaching you note writing or note taking, that's great. But if not, then you probably are feeling insecure. So for that area, you might want to consider taking a documentation course. There's some really good ones out there online that are self-paced, recorded trainings. So if you fit into any of the 6 categories I've listed, I'm going to go through the categories again, and I'm going to give you tips to get caught up and stay caught up. So for the area of the emotional toll, this can be especially difficult for some niches, such as those that do work around deep trauma. Writing the note immediately after the session while you're still in that emotional headspace can be really helpful. And depending on your treatment approach, you can consider doing conjoint notes where you write the note as the session occurs, or you can leave time at the end of the session to summarize with your client and write the note with them there. Some people find that's a really helpful way to review the sessions with clients each time. If you don't have a good system in place, then let's look at that area. There's nothing better than ending your day knowing all of your notes have been written and you've filed your insurance claims. One way of achieving this is by allowing 5 minutes between sessions to complete the note immediately. And you really can do a 5-minute note if you get your system down pat. If you don't have time for doing the whole note in between sessions, take a minute to jot down keywords and quotes from the session to make it easier when you return to write the note later. So some of the things you want to consider here when you are trying to look at different systems is, one, you can create a structured schedule that includes dedicated time for progress note documentation. Prioritize it as an essential part of your workload to ensure consistency and prevent accumulation. You might want to consider template or form-based documentation. You can utilize pre-designed templates or electronic health record systems that offer customizable forms for progress notes. These templates can really streamline the process, making it quicker and easier to complete notes accurately. And a lot of people also find that using a number of checkboxes in your note can make your note go really quickly as well. You want to look at efficient documentation practices. Develop a habit of taking brief notes or keywords during or immediately after the session, as I said earlier. And these are going to be a good, helpful reference for you. But the one area you want to consider here is don't fool yourself into a false sense of security that you've made these notes and you're going to get to it later, because it's really easy to put that off. And then maybe the keywords don't make any sense anymore, or you lose your notes, and then you are having a bigger issue with trying to come up with what you need to put on that note, of course, which is then not going to very accurately represent what occurred in the session. You can also use abbreviations or shorthand. Sometimes when I started in this field, I created some of my own shorthand that I found really helpful. Common words that like the word relationship, I write the lowercase letter r, a slash, and then a lowercase letter s. I don't do that in my note, but for my shorthand, I use a number of things like that to just help me not have to write out some of those longer words. Okay, for those of you with ADHD brains like myself, systems are probably a huge part of your life. Having a firm rule about when you write the note and not allowing yourself to negotiate a different time can be key to making note-taking at the end of the session or by the end of the day, if this can be really useful. You might also consider using voice or text input if your EHR has that option. And you might consider breaking down the progress note into smaller, more manageable chunks. So having specific sections so you can be organized in your mind about what goes where. You can also consider tools such as timers or using the Pomodoro technique to stay focused and increase productivity. Number 4, this area where when you're too far behind is a really, really tough one. And it makes it easier for you to continue to be far and far behind. It happens to all of us every now and then, though. So whether you have too much on your plate due to the demand for mental health services that we've encountered since the pandemic, or you were sick, or you've been having a hard time doing your notes in general, the most helpful thing to do is to stay current with your notes. If you have overdue notes from 2 weeks ago, say, write the notes for today and work your way back for each client. So I'm going to see Sally Ann today, and I'm going to write Sally Ann's note today, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to write those notes, the last 2 weeks notes that I didn't do, and now I'm caught back up. And then I'm going to slowly get caught up on each client. Some EHRs will allow you to copy the past note into the current one so that you can go back and work on those missing notes. And a lot of times you are building on the work that you're doing with the client. So that might be something that will help you get a little more cohesive in what you're writing. An area that I said before about what should be in the note is huge. Writing notes for liability reasons and insurance reimbursement can be very different from those you wrote at an agency or even in grad school. Do a little research. Each insurance panel will outline what needs to be in a progress note for reimbursement. Many EHRs have note templates that you can use and modify to make sure everything is covered. Consider taking an e-course, like I said earlier, or find somebody who has been an auditor in the past and offers auditing services where they can look through some of your notes and offer suggestions on making sure they're going to be compliant with your insurance companies. And if you have a cumbersome EHR, and that was area number 6, you want to really take a look at that. The system you use should work for you and the way you practice. There are a number of choices of EHRs, and testing out several to see which one works well with how you practice is important. What works for your colleague may not be a good fit for you. So here are a few more tips before I wrap this up. Self-care and professional support are huge when it comes to this aspect of our work, along with many others. And I don't like even using the word self-care any longer, but make sure that you're engaging in activities that rejuvenate you and that help you maintain a healthy work-life balance. You also want to seek professional support such as supervision or consultation to discuss challenges related to progress note documentation. Supervisors or mentors can provide guidance, suggestions, and help navigate any uncertainties. And again, this is an area where your consultation group is going to be really helpful. They can help you with terminology for a progress note or a treatment letter, things like that that you need to send, just if you want to have other eyes on it so you feel a little bit more confident. Have a specific procedure written down that defines how and when you need to write a progress note within 24 hours of session or prior to submitting the insurance claim. Even if you are a solo practitioner, having a policy and procedures manual can be hugely helpful for things like this. It helps you stay organized and make sure that you have a plan in place. You might consider working with a colleague. Many people find it easier to stay on task if they're working with someone else. For ADHD brains, we call this body doubling. Set up a time to write notes with a colleague, or have them be your accountability partner whom you can notify when you've completed your note for the day or for the week. You can also use a service such as FocusMate to get paired up with somebody for this. And then also set aside some admin time each day or each work so that you have uninterrupted time to get the damn things done. They've got to be done. We need to be looking for proactive ways of figuring out what's causing the delay, how to get caught up, and how to stay caught up. So remember, falling behind on progress notes is a common challenge faced by many therapists. Please do not judge yourself if this has happened to you. By implementing some of these solutions, you can regain control, reduce stress, and ensure that your documentation practices align with professional standards. That wraps up today's episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. Thank you for joining me as I explored the impact of getting behind on progress notes and hopefully some practical solutions for you to overcome this challenge. Remember, your well-being and the quality of care you provide are interconnected. By effectively managing progress note documentation, you're taking a proactive step towards enhancing both. For everyone listening, there are new episodes released every Thursday on all major platforms. Please remember, our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely.
Thank you so much for listening to the Colleague Down the Hall podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to colleaguedownthehall.com, where you'll be able to learn more about getting the clinical support you need and resources to help you work in a supported, sustainable way. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your therapy friends and colleagues. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you loved this episode, please leave a review.